The princess fell for a human prince, and enemies rose in silence. From her palace balcony, Princess Zyra watched the clouds drift beneath the towers, their soft currents carrying the city's hum. Elendra had always been a place of perfection, an advanced civilization of elegance, intelligence, and tradition. But today, Zyra felt a strange sense of anticipation she could not explain. The air was charged with something new, something unfamiliar. Her advisors had warned her of the visitor arriving from Earth, a human prince who would represent his world in trade and diplomacy. Humans were primitive by Elendran standards, clumsy, unpredictable, often emotional, but they had one undeniable strength: their courage. Zyra had studied them in secret, fascinated by their creativity, their stubbornness, their willingness to fight against impossible odds. And yet she had never expected to meet one in person. Prince Adrian arrived in his sleek silver craft, landing gracefully on the designated platform. Humans rarely traveled so far from their home, and his confidence impressed the attending Elendrans. Adrian stepped out, tall and composed, his dark eyes scanning the surroundings with calm curiosity. There was nothing fragile about him. There was an aura of strength, tempered with intelligence, that immediately drew attention. Zyra's heart beat a little faster as she approached the welcoming ceremony. She had prepared for protocol, for cold diplomacy, for cautious observation, but her instincts told her this encounter would be different. She studied the human as he bowed respectfully, his gesture precise but not stiff. He smiled politely, the corners of his eyes crinkling in a way that seemed genuine rather than rehearsed. "Princess Zyra," he said, his voice steady, carrying a subtle warmth. "It is an honor to meet you." "And you, Prince Adrian," she replied, her voice careful yet curious. "I hope your journey was pleasant," he nodded. "Long but enlightening. I have studied your world, Princess, and I am eager to learn more." Zyra tilted her head slightly, intrigued. Many humans had come before, full of bravado or fear, yet Adrian's calm focus was unusual. She sensed no deception, no arrogance, only a quiet confidence that seemed to match her own. As the formalities continued, Zyra found herself drawn to him, not only as a visitor but as something far more compelling. She watched how he moved, how he observed the palace and its people, how he interacted with the Elendrans without the typical clumsiness of humans. There was something remarkably human about the way he solved problems in real time, using insight rather than just data. The first real test came unexpectedly. A minor mechanical failure occurred in one of the palace's hovering platforms, a problem that would have taken hours for Elendran engineers to diagnose. Adrian noticed it immediately, pointing out a solution that combined human practicality with the palace's advanced technology. Zyra watched as he spoke, the engineers nodding and following his instructions, their skepticism turning into admiration. "You have a clever mind," she admitted when the task was complete. Adrian's smile was modest. "I have learned that sometimes the simplest solution is the best. Perhaps your world could benefit from a little human pragmatism." Zyra laughed softly, a sound rare in the formal halls of Elendra. She felt a spark of excitement, a rare flutter that made her chest feel light. This human, so different from any she had imagined, challenged her expectations in the best possible way. Yet not everyone shared her admiration. Hidden in the shadows of the palace corridors, Lord Vanar watched with narrowed eyes. He was one of the most influential advisors, a man who valued tradition above all else. To him, humans were a threat, a potential source of chaos. The princess's growing interest in the human prince was dangerous, not just for her, but for Elendro itself. "They must not be allowed to grow close," Vanar murmured to his confidant. "Humans are unpredictable, their emotions are weak, and yet she looks at him as if he is more than a man. We cannot allow this." Meanwhile, Zyra and Adrian spent the following days exploring the floating gardens and observation towers, engaging in discussions that ranged from art to technology to philosophy. Each encounter revealed new layers of understanding between them. Adrian admired the precision and intelligence of the Elendrans, while Zyra was captivated by his curiosity and adaptability. During one evening stroll on a balcony overlooking the shimmering city, Adrian pointed to the distant stars. "In my world, humans have always looked at the stars and wondered. We dream of what is beyond, of what we cannot yet reach. And yet, we often find that courage and determination carry us further than technology alone." Zyra considered his words, feeling a resonance within her. Elendrins prided themselves on intellect and perfection, but Adrian spoke of something more, a quality she recognized in humans, one that humans alone possessed: resilience. The ability to rise, to adapt, to take risks despite fear. Their growing connection did not go unnoticed. Some palace members whispered about the princess's unusual behavior, her laughter with the human prince, the way her eyes seemed to linger on him longer than protocol allowed. Others admired the new energy he brought into their world, the subtle lessons of ingenuity and courage he offered without even trying. One evening, during a formal dinner, a small crisis arose. A security drone malfunctioned, threatening to disrupt the event. While Elendrin guards hesitated, Adrian stepped forward calmly, analyzing the situation. With precise instructions and quick thinking, he averted the problem. Zyra watched, her heart swelling with admiration. She realized that humans, though considered fragile by Elendrin standards, had a unique strength that machines and advanced technology alone could not replicate. "You are remarkable," she said quietly afterward, her voice carrying more warmth than intended. Adrian looked at her, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Remarkable, perhaps, but I have only done what any human would, given the situation. Sometimes courage is a simple choice." The words lingered in Zyra's mind. Elendrins had perfected science and logic, yet they had often overlooked the power of choice driven by emotion, by instinct, by determination. She felt a quiet thrill, a sense of possibility she had never known before. But shadows lurked behind the palace walls. Lord Vanar and his allies began to move in silence, plotting to test the human prince and, if necessary, to expose him as a fraud. Their methods were subtle: rumors, insinuations, questions designed to sow doubt. The palace hummed with the undercurrent of tension, though Zyra remained blissfully unaware. Adrian, too, sensed the subtle hostility, though he could not yet identify its source. He noticed the cautious glances of some Elendrins, the whispered conversations that halted as he approached. Yet he remained steadfast, determined to prove through action rather than words that humans could rise to meet even the most advanced civilizations. One night, as Zyra walked alone through the moonlit gardens, Adrian appeared beside her, silently offering companionship. They walked together among the glowing flora, the city lights reflecting in their eyes. "You seem troubled," he observed gently. "I wonder about my people," Zyra admitted. "They are cautious, proud, and sometimes unwilling to accept change. And yet I cannot ignore what I feel. I cannot ignore what you have shown me, that courage and determination matter as much as intelligence." Adrian nodded. "Every civilization has its fears. Yours fear the unknown. But fear can be overcome by trust, by action, and by the willingness to see beyond what is comfortable." Zyra smiled softly, the warmth of his words settling in her heart. She realized that this human prince had not only captured her attention, but also inspired her, awakened something within her that had long been dormant, a desire to lead with courage and to challenge the limits of tradition. As the night deepened, Zyra and Adrian stood together under the stars, silent but connected. Unspoken emotions hung between them, fragile and potent. And somewhere in the distant corridors of the palace, Lord Vaynar's eyes glinted with resolve. He would watch, he would wait, and he would act. The bonds forming between princess and prince were dangerous to him, and he intended to protect Elendra from what he saw as a threat before it was too late. But for Zyra, the future had begun to shimmer with possibility. The world she had always known, perfect and ordered, now seemed full of chance, of courage, and of new discoveries. And she was ready to embrace it, even if it meant stepping into uncharted territory, guided by a human prince whose presence challenged everything she had ever believed. In that quiet moment, above the glowing towers of Elendra, two hearts, one alien, one human, felt the first stirrings of a connection that would change the fate of two worlds. Neither fully understood what lay ahead, yet both sensed that together they could achieve something extraordinary. The city slept beneath them, peaceful yet unaware of the silent intrigue forming in its halls. And in the shadows, enemies rose in silence, waiting for the moment to test the strength of this unusual bond. But for now, beneath the endless expanse of stars, Princess Zyra and Prince Adrian simply existed together, curious, cautious, and quietly daring to hope. Days passed in Elendra, each one carrying a quiet tension that only Zyra seemed to sense fully. She moved through the palace halls with her usual grace, but her mind lingered on the human prince. Adrian's presence had become more than a curiosity. It had become a source of inspiration, a reminder that the universe was larger, more daring, and more complex than Elendra's perfection alone could explain. Adrian, for his part, had begun to adapt to the rhythm of Elendran life. He learned their language quickly, though with a subtle accent that some considered charming. He studied their technology and culture, always curious, always questioning. Where humans relied on improvisation and instinct, Elendrans prized calculation and precision. Yet in their differences, Adrian saw opportunity. He admired their intelligence, and he hoped they might, in turn, understand the power of human adaptability. Their time together deepened naturally. Zyra invited him to explore the city's training halls, where Elendrans practiced a combination of martial precision and mental discipline. Adrian observed quietly at first, then offered small suggestions, adjustments to stance, timing, and coordination that merged human practicality with Elendran elegance. To Zyra's surprise, some of the instructors began to incorporate his ideas into their routines, curious at the unexpected results. "You are teaching them without meaning to," she whispered during one session, stepping beside him as he demonstrated a technique. Adrian smiled. Sometimes the best lessons are discovered rather than imposed. Humans learn from trial and observation. Perhaps Elendrans can benefit from that too. Their closeness grew, and with it, subtle feelings neither wanted to acknowledge aloud. They shared quiet conversations in the gardens, where the air shimmered with luminescent flora, and the city's lights reflected softly in the waters of hovering pools. They discussed philosophy, history, and the nature of courage, discovering in each other a mind that was both challenging and comforting. Yet, as their bond strengthened, the undercurrents of disapproval became more apparent. Lord Vaynar moved silently through the palace, his eyes sharp and calculating. He noticed the laughter that echoed through the halls, the way Zyra's gaze lingered on Adrian, the small gestures of trust and camaraderie that were forbidden in Elendran tradition. "We must act," he said quietly to his allies in a hidden chamber. "The princess's attachment to this human grows. Soon, it will be a threat not only to our customs, but to the stability of Elendra itself. We cannot allow this bond to continue unchallenged." Vaynar's plan was subtle. He began planting doubts among the council, suggesting that humans were unpredictable, that Adrian might have motives Elendra could not comprehend. Rumors of espionage, manipulation, and hidden agendas circulated quietly. The palace seemed unchanged to outsiders, but beneath the surface, a silent war of perception had begun. Meanwhile, Zyra and Adrian faced their own challenges. While Elendran society admired skill and intelligence, it had little regard for human courage or innovation. They encountered skepticism at every turn, small gestures of doubt, cautious glances, and questions that tested their patience. Yet Adrian never wavered. He faced each challenge with calm determination, showing the Elendrans that courage could be just as powerful as intellect. One day, a critical incident occurred that brought these tensions to the surface. A sector of the city's energy grid began to fail, threatening to collapse the floating districts. Elendran engineers were at a loss. They could calculate, repair, and manage, but they could not foresee the human factor, the unexpected complications that often arise in crisis. Adrian immediately assessed the situation, moving among the control panels and diagnostic consoles. He noticed patterns that had been overlooked, connections between energy flows that the Elendran minds considered too insignificant to matter. With calm authority, he proposed a solution that combined Elendran precision with human improvisation. Zyra watched him work, her admiration deepening. Humans, she realized, were not weaker than Elendrans, they were different. Their strength lay in flexibility, in the ability to adapt when perfection faltered. The solution succeeded. The city stabilized, and for a moment the hall was filled with quiet astonishment. The engineers, initially hesitant, now looked at Adrian with a newfound respect. Even some of Vaynar's allies could not ignore the results. You saved this district," one elder said, voice heavy with awe. "With human methods," Adrian nodded simply. "We all adapt to survive. Elendra's brilliance is undeniable, but even brilliance can falter without flexibility." Zyra felt a warmth rise within her chest. She had always believed in the potential of humans, but seeing Adrian act so decisively, blending courage with intellect, convinced her that he was extraordinary. It was not just the human in him, but the human qualities Elendrins often dismissed, resilience, adaptability, and bravery, that made him remarkable. The day's success brought a quiet celebration. Zyra and Adrian walked together through the gardens, their steps slow and deliberate. The floating lights reflected on the pools, creating patterns that danced like stars on the water's surface. "You have changed how I see my people," Zyra admitted softly. "Humans are so often underestimated. And yet your courage, your perspective, it shows me that strength is more than perfection." Adrian glanced at her, his dark eyes steady and warm. "I have only done what humans do best, face the challenge in front of us, adapt and act. Perhaps your people can learn that too if they choose to." Their conversation was interrupted by a subtle disturbance. A group of palace attendants hurried past, their faces tense. Zyra's instincts told her that something was amiss. She turned, sensing the silent threat that had been growing around them. Lord Vanar had begun to make his move. His allies in the council whispered suggestions, casting shadows over Adrian's presence. Small obstacles appeared in their path, doors that were unexpectedly closed, meetings that were rescheduled without explanation, subtle insinuations that Adrian's intentions might be dangerous. The palace was turning into a silent battlefield, with every glance and word carrying hidden meaning. Zyra realized that her feelings for Adrian would not only test her heart, but also challenge her authority. Elendra had always valued order and tradition above all else. She had grown accustomed to rules, to expectations, and to the careful maintenance of control. But Adrian represented something unpredictable, something alive, something that could not be measured in calculations or status. Despite the challenges, their connection only deepened. They spent evenings in quiet conversation, exploring the floating terraces and hidden alcoves of the palace. They discussed strategy, ethics, and the nature of courage. Zyra began to understand that humans possessed a kind of inner strength that could complement Elendrin perfection, rather than conflict with it. Their bond became a source of subtle inspiration to others. Younger Elendrins, curious and open-minded, began to observe them with interest, seeing the potential for collaboration between human adaptability and Elendrin precision. Whispers of hope circulated among those who longed for change, for a world where different strengths could unite rather than clash. Yet danger was never far. Lord Vanar's plots continued, growing more sophisticated and insidious. He sought to discredit Adrian, to test his abilities, and to undermine his influence without provoking open conflict. Each subtle maneuver forced Zyra and Adrian to navigate Elendrin politics carefully, using intelligence, insight, and human intuition to counteract the silent threats. One evening, as a pale moonlight spilled over the palace gardens, Zyra and Adrian sat together on the edge of a floating terrace. The city lights below twinkled like scattered stars, reflecting the endless possibilities that stretched across the sky. "You face obstacles everywhere," Zyra said, her voice tinged with worry. "And yet you do not falter." Adrian shook his head. "I do falter, Princess. Humans falter often, but we rise, we adapt, and we act again. That is what makes us strong. That is what you see in me now." Zyra reached out, her fingers brushing his hand lightly. The touch was simple, yet it carried a quiet promise, a connection that went beyond words. "I see more than strength," she whispered. "I see courage, curiosity, and a heart that will not be confined by fear or expectation." The moment lingered, fragile yet potent. For all the silent threats that surrounded them, they had found something real, something unshakable. And though they did not know the full scope of the dangers yet, they knew they could face them together, drawing on the unique strengths of both human and Elendrin. In the following days, they continued to work together, their partnership growing in skill, trust, and mutual admiration. Adrian's practical approach solved small crises, while Zyra's leadership ensured stability. Their combined efforts began to demonstrate to the palace, and the city that humans and Elendrins could achieve remarkable results when they united. Lord Vanar, observing from the shadows, realized that his challenge would be greater than he anticipated. This human was not merely clever or lucky. He was resilient, brave, and willing to act where Elendrins hesitated. Vanar's whispers of doubt and suspicion were no longer enough to contain the growing respect for Adrian. The palace itself seemed to shift subtly, as if acknowledging that change was inevitable. Despite the hidden dangers, Zyra allowed herself a moment of hope. She began to envision a future where humans and Elendrins could stand side by side, learning from one another, facing the universe's challenges with combined strength. And she realized that her connection with Adrian was no longer a simple curiosity. It was the beginning of a partnership that could transform not only their hearts, but their worlds. As night fell over Elendra, the floating city shimmered in silver and gold, peaceful on the surface but alive with unseen currents of intrigue and ambition. In the quiet of her chambers, Zyra reflected on the days that had passed. She thought of Adrian's courage, his intelligence, his unwavering calm in the face of uncertainty. And she knew, with a certainty that was rare in Elendra, that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. And somewhere in the silent halls of the palace, Lord Vanar plotted still, determined to test the limits of this human prince and the strength of the bond forming with the princess. But for now, amidst the glowing gardens and the tranquil skies, Zyra and Adrian simply existed together, curious, courageous, and quietly daring to hope for a future that neither had yet imagined. The days ahead would bring trials, challenges, and revelations, but the foundation of trust and admiration they had built was unshakable. And in that trust, both human and Elendrin found the first true glimmers of something extraordinary, a partnership that could bridge worlds and a courage that could defy expectations. Weeks passed, and the bond between Princess Zyra and Prince Adrian grew stronger with each day. Their partnership was no longer a secret to those who watched closely, and their influence was spreading subtly across the palace and city. Together, they solved small crises, guided young Elendrins in new thinking, and inspired confidence that humans and Elendrins could achieve extraordinary things together. Yet with every achievement, the tension within the palace thickened, and the shadows of conspiracy grew longer. Lord Vanar watched the progress with narrowed eyes. The princess's admiration for the human prince, once a small curiosity, had now become a visible force in Elendra. His whispers of doubt and manipulation, which had unsettled minor officials, were proving insufficient. The people were beginning to see what he refused to acknowledge: the strength in unity, the power of courage, and the spark of ingenuity that humans brought. Vanar knew he had to escalate his plans, and he began orchestrating subtle moves that could test both the prince and the princess without openly challenging the crown. One morning, an urgent message arrived from the floating districts. A natural storm had erupted beyond the city's protective shields, threatening the energy flow and stability of several sectors. Elendrin engineers rushed to manage the situation, but the problem was unusual, a chaotic pattern in the storm that had never been observed. The city's advanced predictive models struggled to respond effectively. Panic began to ripple among the staff, for Elendrins were accustomed to perfection, and imperfection was alarming. Adrian immediately stepped forward, examining the situation with careful attention. He noticed irregularities that the Elendrin models had dismissed as insignificant. Using a combination of his human intuition and Elendrin technology, he proposed a solution that required rapid adjustments and a few calculated risks. Zyra observed, her heart pounding as she realized the magnitude of the challenge. Success was uncertain, yet she trusted Adrian's judgment completely. The palace engineers hesitated, reluctant to act without formal approval. Vanar watched this hesitation with a cruel satisfaction, believing that it would lead to failure. Yet Zyra, with her calm authority and unwavering confidence in Adrian, gave the command to proceed. She spoke with a clarity and strength that silenced doubt, showing the council that leadership required courage as much as intellect. Adrian directed the adjustments, issuing instructions with precision while also allowing room for improvisation, a human approach foreign to Elendrin training. The storm raged outside, threatening the city, but slowly, sector by sector, the energy stabilized. Elendrin engineers watched in astonishment as the unpredictable human methods worked alongside their advanced technology, achieving what Elendrin logic alone could not. When the crisis finally passed, silence fell over the control room. Then came murmurs of approval, followed by cheers. Zyra smiled at Adrian, her admiration deepened by both his skill and his composure under pressure. He had not only solved the problem, but had shown the palace a new way of thinking, an approach that balanced intellect with courage and adaptability. Yet the victory was only temporary. Lord Vaynar had anticipated that humans might succeed in certain situations, and he was not deterred. The next move of his plan was subtler and more dangerous. He began spreading rumors, questioning Adrian's loyalty and intentions. Small incidents were manipulated to appear as though Adrian might be hiding something, and some Elendrins began to whisper about espionage, manipulation, and the risk of relying on a human. Zyra soon noticed the change in the atmosphere. Allies who had previously supported them began acting cautiously, hesitant to express admiration openly. Even some of the young Elendrins who had shown curiosity and openness started questioning the wisdom of aligning so closely with a human. Zyra knew she had to act decisively to protect both Adrian and the potential for unity they represented. She confronted Vaynar privately, her voice steady and resolute. "Your fear blinds you," she said. "Adrian has proven himself time and again. His courage, intelligence, and loyalty are undeniable. You will not manipulate this palace to satisfy your prejudice." Vaynar's eyes narrowed, and he spoke in a low, controlled tone. "Princess, I serve Elendra and its traditions. I do not oppose him out of personal dislike. I oppose him because you are allowing your emotions to cloud judgment. Humans are unpredictable, and their motives are often hidden. You risk the stability of your people." Zyra held his gaze. "I am aware of the risks. But I will not ignore the truth that has become clear to me. Humans can be brave, intelligent, and capable of partnership. I will not let fear dictate my actions." Despite her words, the political tension continued to rise. Vaynar orchestrated a subtle test, inviting Adrian to participate in a ceremonial display of skill that was meant to humiliate and challenge him. The challenge was complex, requiring precision, quick thinking, and adherence to Elendrin rituals, an environment designed to expose weaknesses and highlight human limitations. Adrian, aware of the unspoken intentions, approached the task with calm determination. He studied the challenge carefully, analyzing it with both human practicality and the knowledge he had gained of Elendrin systems. Zyra watched, her heart tight with both worry and admiration. She knew that the outcome would affect not only Adrian's reputation, but also the perception of humans in Elendrin society. The ceremony began. Elendrin observers, expecting the human to falter, watched closely. Adrian executed the first stage flawlessly, earning quiet acknowledgement. The second stage, more complex and designed to confuse, tested both skill and composure. Adrian paused briefly, assessing the situation, then made adjustments that combined human ingenuity with Elendrin methods. Each move was precise yet adaptive, earning him cautious nods from the council. By the final stage, the room was tense. Adrian completed the challenge successfully, demonstrating a harmony of human creativity and Elendrin precision. Zyra felt a swell of pride, not just for the prince but for what this moment represented. The ability of humans to rise, adapt, and achieve even in a world that doubted them. Even some of Vaynar's allies could not deny the success. The murmurs of doubt began to fade, replaced by quiet admiration. Yet Vaynar himself was unshaken. He knew that admiration could be fleeting, and he still held the power to influence events subtly. The next challenge would be less public, more insidious, and potentially more dangerous. In the quiet of the evening, Zyra and Adrian met in the palace gardens. The air was cool, carrying the scent of luminescent flowers and the faint hum of the city. They walked side by side, sharing thoughts and reflections, their bond growing stronger in the calm after the storm. "You handled yourself with remarkable skill today," Zyra said softly, her eyes reflecting the soft light. "Even those who doubted you had to see the truth." Adrian shook his head modestly. "I only did what needed to be done. Humans often rely on quick thinking and adaptability. Perhaps your people have forgotten the power of facing challenges with courage, rather than only calculation." Zyra smiled, feeling a sense of wonder she had not experienced before. "You remind me that strength comes in many forms. Courage, resilience, and adaptability are just as powerful as intellect and tradition." Their conversation was interrupted by a messenger who brought urgent news. A small group of Elendrin operatives had discovered evidence of a plot, one that could disrupt the stability of the palace and potentially put Adrian at risk. The threat was subtle but real, and Zyra realized that the stakes were higher than she had imagined. Adrian immediately assessed the situation, considering both Elendrin and human strategies. Together, they devised a plan to neutralize the threat without resorting to aggression or panic. They moved quietly, coordinating allies who were loyal and capable, using intelligence and strategy to counteract the conspirators. The plan worked. The operatives were intercepted before any damage could be done, and the evidence of the plot was carefully documented to prevent future attempts. Zyra watched with admiration as Adrian handled the situation with calm authority, demonstrating courage, insight, and leadership under pressure. As the night deepened, Zyra and Adrian sat together on a balcony overlooking the city. The floating lights reflected in the pools and rivers below, creating a scene of serenity and possibility. "Every challenge brings us closer," Zyra said softly. "And yet I know the path ahead will not be easy. There are those who still oppose you, still oppose us." Adrian nodded. "I expected nothing less. Challenges are what define us. Humans rise by facing what others fear and by learning from what is unfamiliar. Together, we can show them that cooperation and courage are stronger than fear and prejudice." Zyra reached out, her hand brushing his lightly. The gesture was simple but full of meaning, a connection built on trust, admiration, and the understanding that they faced the future together. In the following days, their combined leadership and courage inspired more allies. Young Elendrans began to train with them, learning new methods and approaches that blended human intuition with Elendran skill. The city began to change subtly, as whispers of hope and admiration replaced some of the older, fearful narratives. Yet Lord Vaynar's influence remained a shadow over the palace. He understood that the human prince was more than clever or lucky. He was resilient, brave, and willing to act where Elendrans hesitated. The upcoming challenges would test not only Adrian's skills, but also the bond between him and the princess, and the strength of the partnership that could redefine the future of Elendra. For now, though, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Zyra and Adrian found moments of peace. They had faced public scrutiny, hidden threats, and natural crises, and yet their connection endured. They had proven that humans, when combined with courage and determination, could achieve extraordinary results, even in a civilization that had once doubted them. And as the stars shone above Elendra, quiet and eternal, both human and Elendran felt a sense of purpose and possibility. The trials of the past weeks had strengthened their partnership, preparing them for the greater challenges yet to come. And in that preparation, they discovered the true power of courage, unity, and the quiet determination that defined the human spirit. The silent threats of Vaynar and his allies still loomed, but the foundation had been laid. The bond between princess and human prince had proven itself strong, and the path forward, though uncertain, was filled with potential, a potential that neither time nor opposition could diminish. And somewhere in the palace shadows, Vaynar observed, calculating, waiting, and plotting his next move. Yet for the first time he faced the realization that his plans might not succeed. Humans, he saw now, were more than he had ever expected. And the princess's unwavering belief in Adrian was a force he could not ignore. For Zyra and Adrian, the journey had only just begun, and the trials they would face next promised to test not only their skills but their courage, their wisdom, and the strength of the bond that now defined both their hearts and the future of Elendra. The morning sun rose over Elendra, casting golden light on the floating city and illuminating its towers and gardens with warmth. Princess Zyra stood on the balcony of her chambers, looking out at the city below. The events of the past weeks had changed everything. Humans were no longer seen as simple outsiders. Adrian's courage, ingenuity, and calmness in crises had earned the admiration of many. Yet danger still lingered in the shadows. Lord Vaynar had not given up. His plans to challenge Adrian and influence the palace quietly continued, though now they faced a stronger, more united front than before. Adrian joined Zyra on the balcony, his presence calm and reassuring. He had spent the early hours reviewing maps and data regarding potential threats to the city. Even in a place as advanced as Elendra, the unexpected could always arise. "The storm patterns are shifting again," he said, pointing to projections in the holographic display hovering above his hands. "It is not dangerous yet, but if left unchecked, it could affect several districts simultaneously." Zyra nodded. "Then we act immediately. We cannot let fear paralyze us. We must show them, your people, my people, that courage and action matter." Together, they moved to the control hall, where engineers and strategists were already preparing for potential disasters. Adrian's approach combined human pragmatism with Elendran precision. He analyzed the data carefully, asking questions that challenged assumptions. Zyra supported him, asserting her authority and guiding the team through the necessary steps. Their teamwork was seamless, a perfect blend of insight, courage, and leadership. As the situation escalated, Vaynar watched from the council chamber, frustrated that his subtle manipulations had failed. He had hoped to catch Adrian off guard or make him falter under pressure, but the human prince continued to display composure, intelligence, and initiative. Vaynar realized that if he wanted to maintain influence, he would need a more daring approach. He began plotting to create a political crisis that would test not only Adrian's skill, but also Zyra's resolve as a leader. Meanwhile, Zyra and Adrian moved through the floating districts, supervising efforts to stabilize the energy grids affected by the approaching storm. Citizens and younger Elendrans looked on in awe as the princess and the human prince coordinated teams, adjusted strategies in real time, and displayed remarkable problem-solving skills. Even the more skeptical Elendrans began to see what humans could offer: courage, adaptability, and creative thinking. One particularly complex issue arose when a cluster of energy nodes became dangerously unstable. Traditional Elendran methods alone could not stabilize them quickly enough. Adrian assessed the nodes, observing patterns that others had overlooked. He devised a solution that required rapid coordination, some calculated improvisation, and clear communication with multiple teams. Zyra, trusting his judgment completely, gave the necessary commands. Together, they guided the teams through the operation. The plan worked flawlessly. The nodes stabilized, and the storm's effects were contained before they could cause any harm. Cheers erupted across the districts, and the citizens watched in admiration. Zyra smiled at Adrian, proud of the partnership they had built and the confidence they had inspired. Despite the success, Vaynar refused to give up. He moved to exploit any remaining opportunity to discredit the human prince. He arranged a council debate to question the ethics of relying on humans in Elendran decision-making. His allies carefully framed their arguments, emphasizing tradition and the dangers of trusting outsiders. The tension in the council chamber was palpable. Adrian remained calm, standing beside Zyra. When it was his turn to speak, he addressed the council with clarity and sincerity. "Humans are not perfect," he said, "but neither is any civilization. What matters is courage, adaptability, and the willingness to act when faced with challenges. Elendra's strength is remarkable, but no society can survive on perfection alone. Humans offer a different form of strength, one that complements intellect and precision." Zyra followed, her voice firm and unwavering. "We have seen what can happen when courage and intellect work together. Adrian's actions have saved lives, stabilized crises, and shown us that collaboration between our peoples can achieve what neither could alone. Fear and prejudice must not guide our decisions. We must lead with trust, with vision, and with courage." The council fell silent. For a moment, even Vaynar found himself unable to respond. The truth in their words was undeniable. The younger Elendrans, inspired by their example, began to speak in support, emphasizing results over tradition. Slowly, the tide of opinion shifted. Vaynar's influence weakened as more voices championed cooperation and trust. With the council on their side, Zyra and Adrian focused on strengthening the bond between humans and Elendrans. They initiated training programs that combined human problem-solving with Elendran skill, created joint projects to advance city infrastructure, and encouraged young Elendrans to embrace curiosity and adaptability. Each success further demonstrated that unity was stronger than fear. Even Vaynar, though unwilling to admit it, began to realize that resistance was futile. Adrian was not merely clever or fortunate. He was resilient, courageous, and fully committed to the well-being of Elendra. The human prince had earned respect through action, not words. His presence, once a source of tension, now became a symbol of what could be achieved when differences were embraced rather than feared. One evening, as the city glowed beneath a violet sky, Zyra and Adrian stood together on a high balcony. The wind carried the scent of flowering plants and the hum of the floating city below. They looked out at the horizon where new districts were being built, and citizens moved confidently in their daily lives. "You've changed more than just my people," Zyra said softly. "You've changed me." You've shown me that leadership is not only about rules and tradition, but about courage, vision, and trust. Adrian smiled, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. And you've shown me the power of wisdom, responsibility, and the strength that comes from guiding a people with care. Together, we are stronger than we could ever be alone. Their connection, now unspoken but undeniable, reflected the larger truth of their journey. Humans and Elendrins working together could achieve extraordinary things. Each challenge had taught them lessons, strengthened their partnership, and inspired those around them. The final test of their unity came sooner than expected. A neighboring alien faction, observing Elendra's growing prosperity and the unusual alliance between humans and Elendrins, began to prepare a subtle incursion. Their goal was not outright war, but to destabilize the city through sabotage, testing the limits of leadership and collaboration. Zyra and Adrian responded immediately. They coordinated defenses, reinforced energy grids, and deployed teams to monitor vulnerable sectors. Adrian's experience with unpredictable scenarios allowed him to anticipate moves that Elendrins might not have considered. Zyra's leadership ensured that every action was precise, swift, and coordinated. When the first attempts at sabotage were detected, the teams acted quickly. They neutralized threats without causing panic or damage. Citizens watched as the princess and the human prince led with courage and clarity, demonstrating that trust and intelligence could overcome even hidden dangers. The success of their efforts resonated throughout Elendra. The citizens, previously cautious or skeptical, now viewed humans as allies. Young Elendrins, inspired by the example, embraced innovation and adaptability. Even conservative members of the council acknowledged the power of combining human courage with Elendrin skill. Lord Vanar, observing from his private chambers, realized that he had been defeated, not by force, but by action, courage, and leadership. His subtle plans and manipulations had failed. He had underestimated both the human prince and the strength of the bond between the princess and him. There was no open conflict, no humiliation, no public loss, only the quiet recognition that true strength could not be controlled by fear or prejudice. With the city safe and the council unified, Zyra and Adrian finally allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection. They walked through the luminescent gardens, their hands brushing occasionally, their shared smiles full of unspoken understanding. "You have changed everything," Zyra said. "Not just for me, not just for Elendra, but for the future. Our peoples can stand together, face challenges, and achieve what neither could alone." Adrian nodded, his expression calm and proud. "And you have shown me that courage, wisdom, and leadership are as important as ingenuity and skill. Together, we can build a future that honors both our strengths." The city shimmered beneath them, peaceful and thriving. The floating towers reflected the first stars of evening, and a gentle wind carried the scent of flowering plants. Elendra had survived trials, faced internal challenges, and overcome external threats. The bond between humans and Elendrins had proven strong, resilient, and capable of shaping a better future. As night fell, Zyra and Adrian stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out at the city they had helped guide and protect. Their journey had been filled with uncertainty, challenges, and hidden dangers, yet through it all, they had proven the value of courage, unity, and trust. Their connection was more than personal. It was symbolic of a new era, one where differences could be strengths, and where humans could stand proudly beside the most advanced civilizations in the universe. In the quiet of the palace, even Lord Vanar had to admit silently that his world had changed. Humans were no longer outsiders. They were allies, innovators, and exemplars of courage, and the princess, wise and brave, had led the way in embracing this truth. The stars above Elendra shone brightly, endless and eternal. Zyra and Adrian, standing side by side, reflected on all they had accomplished and all that was yet to come. They knew challenges would continue, for the universe was vast and unpredictable. But they also knew that together, with courage, intelligence, and trust, there was nothing they could not face. The human prince and the Elendrin princess had begun not only a personal story of connection and admiration, but a revolution of understanding and respect between worlds. They had faced adversity, opposition, and danger, and emerged stronger, united, and ready to embrace the future. And in the quiet glow of the palace, under the endless stars, they simply stood together, knowing that the greatest journeys were yet to come, and that the courage of humans could shine across the universe, alongside the wisdom of Elendrins, forever changing the destiny of both. Their peoples. The princess fell for a human prince, and enemies rose in silence.